Hello, everybody. Fam Jam, it's been a minute. Listen, I got to touch on the murder of George Floyd. You know, uh, I got to come out of hiding for this one. As a cop and as a human being, I think any of us that have a platform should be using it to address this right now. Uh, I know that Canada and the United States are two very different countries, but we sort of function off a lot of the same principles. And so, because we function off a lot of those same principles, hey, brother, what's going on, man? Can't wait to get you in for some ink, brother. But yeah, as I was saying, I know that we follow a lot of similar principles, but we're different nations. Policing remains much the same. And so I feel that even though I'm a Canadian cop, I have, uh, an ability to comment on this. And like I said, as a retired cop, I think it's my position to do so. So if you don't know, if you've been asleep for like the past week, there was a black gentleman by the name of George Floyd who was murdered in Minneapolis by the cops there. Hey, what's up, brother? It's been a long time, man. We're talking about George Floyd right now. And so George Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis cop over a fraudulent bill. Now, there is so much going on behind the scenes here. I mean, first you got to consider the fact that maybe George didn't know that that bill was fraudulent that he passed. He was initially reported because he passed a. Yeah, I just did. Sorry, was just reading Dan's comment there. But you know, George Floyd may have never even known that he was passing that fraudulent bill to begin with. And then how everything was handled thereafter is fucking simply disgusting and atrocious. There's no excuse for what those cops did to George. None. You cannot articulate this in any way, shape, or form to be justified. I've read the warrant, the arrest warrant for the. Thanks, Crip. Now, I read the arrest warrant for the cop who murdered George. I've read the criminal complaint against him, and I've been trying to pull out little pieces of whatever has been released from the autopsy. Because I can tell you, after having watched that video, as a police officer, there are two things that come to mind: positional asphyxia or positional asphyxiation, and excited delirium. All right. Excited delirium is what happens. It happens in drug users or people who are high. And well, we'll get to that, Dan, because I'm not sure he was dead on scene. And my training and experience is telling me this. But excited delirium happens with people who are high, and it often happens when they're being arrested. These people die often in police custody, and it's pretty much like a heart attack, and that's what I think happened to George. I think he experienced some sort of cardiac issue. That, along with the what I referred to earlier as positional asphyxia. Well, like I said, we'll touch on that in a minute, Dan. Is positional asphyxia. Now, the coroner's report, the ME says that there were no signs of total strangulation or total asphyxia. But what I think happened is that the cop with his knee on George's neck was sufficient to deprive. Oh, that cop knew what he was doing, man. That cop knew what he was doing, 100%. And look, the whole thing with the knee on the neck, we as police officers are taught not to do that because of positional asphyxia and excited delirium. And if you read the charge against the cop that murdered George, they even talk about that. There were a number of other cops that were present at the scene. Any of you who've seen the video can attest to that. Now, one of the cops on the scene actually says something about this to George's killer. He says, "Hey, what about excited delirium? We need to roll him over." And the killer says, "No, he's supposed to be on his guts," which is not the case. And then continued to have the knee on the neck. And so, like I said, I think that between his initial cardiac issue and the deprivation of oxygen, and which prevents oxygen or gas exchange in the lungs, because not only are you taking oxygen in, you're also breathing out CO2 or carbon dioxide. And now that happens in percentages. You're not breathing in pure oxygen and you're not giving out pure CO2. All right. There are percentages of that gas mixture. Okay. And so what I think happened was that this knee on the neck prevented that from happening. He went unconscious subsequently as a result of that, but still had a pulse. And the reason why I say that George still had a pulse was in the moments before he's loaded up onto the ambulance, a carotid pulse is taken. The carotid pulse is grabbing a pulse on your neck. And you can actually see, I don't know if it's a paramedic. They're in like a brown shirt and brown pants or green pants. I can't tell if it's a cop EMS or if it's straight up EMS. But they took a carotid pulse. And many people have brought this up. Why not perform CPR? Well, the issue is that if you perform CPR on somebody with a pulse, you're going to kill them. All right. So I think that was, that's a key issue. It doesn't mean that the cop didn't kill George. And also, considering the fact that George suffered a cardiac issue prior to his being detained like this, there's discussion about him obviously being in medical distress before he was even arrested. And I think that the cops should have taken note of that and they should have rendered appropriate first aid. He wasn't a threat to them. There were no weapons. He wasn't, there were no signs of active resistance. He was in medical distress. There's no excuse for the cops not recognizing that, and they murdered him. All of the cops there, not just the one with the knee on his neck. Now, what I think is that exactly, you could do AR or artificial respiration. Now, this is another thing that I think the cops are going to say, because I think what's going to happen is that when this goes to court, I think that George's murderer is, he's going to plead down to the manslaughter charge. Now, in Canada, manslaughter is a whole other ballgame, okay? We have first degree, second degree, and manslaughter. After that, you get into criminal negligence causing death. And that is basically the manslaughter charge against him, is criminal negligence causing death. And I think that he will end up pleading to that. And I think he's going to walk away, but I think his time on this earth is limited, people. I think somebody is going to get him on the street. And I think that's how, sadly, George will find his justice. But America is burning over this. And, I can't blame people for the riots and for the pillaging. You know what I mean? People tried to be peaceful about this, and people have tried to be peaceful about this. Kaepernick was taking a knee. I mean, regardless of what you think about the guy, regardless of what you think of Kaepernick, Kaepernick taking a knee is, to me, like, I know I'm not American, but as a Canadian, if I see somebody burning a Canadian flag or taking a knee during our anthem, I don't take offense to that as a vet. I take pride in that, because to me that is like the ultimate expression of freedom. When you can burn a nation's flag, or when you can sort of do that to to address your cause, to bring attention to what you're dealing with. And I have the utmost respect for somebody who's willing to do that. And so, like I said, people tried peacefully, but it didn't work, you know? And so, obviously, when tensions are high like this and people are emotional, they're not thinking reasonably, they're not thinking logical. And so you get all this rioting and pillaging, And like I said, I don't agree with it, but I can't blame them. All right. George Floyd was murdered. It's happened so many times, you know, and this was just disgusting. Like, seeing that happen, uh, you know, I know that there are bad cops, all right? But seeing that made me almost embarrassed to be a cop, to have been one. You know what I mean? To have tried and stand for something. Like, I've always tried to live my life that you got to take a stand, and if you don't stand for anything, then you're living for nothing. Um, and so I always tried to do the right thing. I joined the military to try and take a stand for people. I was a cop to try and take a stand for people. And this is just disgusting to see, somebody who's basically out there for the donut and the uniform. Um, you know, um, Now the interesting thing I want to touch on before we're done here is that George and his killer had a relationship. They knew each other for quite a while. Um, they actually worked together. They were co-workers at a club in Minneapolis that, hey, Renee, listen, I'm just going to shut down what I'm talking about for a minute. Renee, thank you so much for sticking with me through everything. You're a true friend. I really do appreciate you, and just everything you've done for me. You're one of the few people that keep me hanging on. So thank you, Renee. Um, On to the topic of George Floyd and his killer. So, mm, exactly, brother, exactly. But are we back? Everybody else got me. We went out there for a minute. But anyways, like I was saying, if you look back at the killer's history, like, it's no secret he's been like this. He had a number of professional complaints against him as a police officer, at least 13 complaints. He's had a number of deaths attributed to his actions on duty. And then when he worked with George Floyd at this club, he was also well known to take things to a new level, kind of in terms of dealing with problematic patrons. He was well known to be macing people and using excessive force. And so again, this is part of my copley intuition, or as an investigator into. Hey, Miss Kent, we're just talking about George Floyd. Yeah, it's surprising that they did keep him on the job after that many complaints, and deaths. Like, George Floyd wasn't this cop's first fucking death, and by cop I mean pig. He wasn't a cop. Cops are good people, but it smells to me, as like I said, as a private previous investigator of violent crimes and premeditated crimes. A lot of me is wondering that there was beef between George and his killer, which would then result in first degree charges. But I think, and I'm worried about this, that possibly the state of Minneapolis or the state of Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis is setting this one up for that negligence plea for the killer. and that is truly where I think this is going to go. But I think that street justice will. Yeah, I am too, and I totally think that that's where it's going to go. I mean, any defense lawyer worth their weight in salt is going to try and plead this one out to a negligence charge and conviction. Uh, it's less time. Like, I don't think this cop will ever see a day on the inside ever. And I'm by cop, I mean pig. Sorry, but I don't think he'll ever see time. Yeah, and that's why they laid it. When cops, when we lay charges, what we often do is one time, like we'll lay the hardest charge we can. Okay, the one with the most severe penalty, and which is the most severe charge. And then what we will also do is we will oftentimes include a secondary charge, often similar to the initial charge, but it's a lesser charge. And the reason why we do this is that it sort of leads the groundwork for a plea deal. Well, see, Cryptic, the problem is that you need to take the video and then you need to compare it with the charge sheet and the warrant for the cop who killed George Floyd, and you also need to compare it with what's known from the autopsy. There is a lot that comes out in the charge sheet and the warrant information against that pig, that really explains a lot more of the situation and what was going on. Agreed 100%. All the cops on scene were complicit. If you read the charge report, though, there was one cop who was concerned about George. And as I mentioned earlier, he actually says to George's killer, he says, "Hey, we got him. We got to get him on his side or on his back. We can't keep him on his guts because of excited delirium." And his killer, still with his knee on George's neck, says, "No, we got to keep him like this," which is absolutely 100% wrong. I learned about this when I was in post-secondary studies to become a cop. I learned about this through training at the police academy, and I learned about it on the road, on the job, that is not, no. It's a huge no-no. But despite, voicing his concerns, he still went along with it. And if anybody's totally going to walk away from this scot-free, it's going to be one of those, or that guy. But everyone else, all the other cops look very young. They look relatively new to the job. And the killer has significant policing experience. He's spent a lot of time already on the police force, and he's worked a lot in security. He definitely knew what he was doing. This was premeditated. It may not be like it would be probably difficult to prove a first degree out of this, but I think that a good prosecutor could easily push for a second degree charge on this. Very easily, and it's sad and disgusting to see that it's not. Miss Kent, sorry I missed your comment there. It doesn't stay up too long on my phone. But listen, I would be remiss if I didn't touch on this. I know I'm Canadian, but this affects us all. So as a human being, like I said, with a platform and the ability to speak on this, I think I have a responsibility to, as a cop with experience and stuff like this, again, I think I have a responsibility to say something. I love the United States very much. It is near and dear to me. I was a U.S. citizen until I joined until I joined the Canadian military. And when I went to Afghanistan, I volunteered to go there, and it was predominantly for the States. That's where half my family is from, and a lot still live there. And it's sad for me to see this happening in such a great country. I think when free Western nations Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're going to catch a knee in the back. It happens. Miss Kent, we're not specifically trained not to do that. But in terms of, pinning somebody with your knee to their neck, we are specifically trained not to do that. But going back to what I was saying is that, when I see a free Western country with its military on the streets acting as police, that's a sad state of affairs right there. And man, I hope that Mr. Floyd didn't die in vain. I hope that America and all of its people, regardless of your color, get answers and that your shit gets sorted out from this. This has been going on too long. All right, let's stop it. Okay, I got stuff to do. I got little kids inside that are screaming for their dad to do stuff with them. We're gonna make some donuts. Why? Because they're the children of a cop, okay? So we're gonna go make some donuts. I love you all. I'm so glad to see so many of you still in here. We'll talk about this some more. Uh, you know, uh, I really do enjoy doing this, and you know, I'm going to try and make more time to get back in touch with everybody because you're all great people. So I want you all to stay up, stay strong, stay healthy, and look out for each other, people, because we are all we got. Peace.